Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another episode of Cricket Mehfil. I'm your host, Behram Qazi, and today we will be breaking down England's 26-run victory in the Multan Test, which also gave them a 2-0 unassailable lead in the series. And with me over here, I have a very, very special guest to do that. Sub-editor at ESPN Cricket Info and Pakistan correspondent, who I was very fortunate to share a working space with during the first two tests, Mr. Danyal Rasool. Danyal, thank you so much for coming to the show, and how are you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me, Param. You've given me a bigger build-up than I feel I deserve. It was a pleasure meeting you finally. We've interacted enough for that not to have happened until now. I've been okay. Just going to Karachi tomorrow, the final test. It's a bit of a shame. It's technically a dead rubber, especially with Pakistan's World Test Championship hopes as well. But yeah, should be a good game. I'm excited to see how the pitch behaves because that's what we seem to all be talking about now. And yeah, Pakistan's chance to avoid history, avoid the first ever 3-0 clean sweep at home. So yeah, there's still a lot at stake despite the 2-0 series result right now.
Yeah, and not just that, but also Pakistan have never lost four consecutive test matches at home. So they'll be hoping that that doesn't just happen for the first time. And that would be really, really embarrassing. And yeah, I mean, for someone who was covering a test series for the very first time, sure, we've lost the series already and it's been 2-0, but it's been a great experience and really enjoyed the opportunity to pick your brains as well and learn from you. But let's move forward with the conversation. And before I even talk about anything else, Daniel, I just want to know, do you think that was out, that Ollie Pope take of Saud Shakeel on 94? Because it's becoming quite a controversial one post-game.
I mean, really, I don't know. It's impossible to know sometimes with 2D imaging and the way you see those pictures. I do think that we at some point have to talk about the soft signal because I don't know that was out. If that was out. Or some of the comments even from Ollie Pope, he didn't seem to know that if that was out. Aleem Dar's soft signal doesn't really make much sense, even if the third umpires have been told not to value that. In hindsight, I just think Pakistan were unfortunate. In most cases, if that had been given not out, I don't think England would have had many complaints. And the fact that it came at such a crucial point in the game makes it a much more bitter pill for Pakistan to swallow. Yeah, short answer, probably not. I don't think it was.
Okay, well, there you have it, viewers. Not out for Danyal Rasool. And yeah, for me personally, it was like 50-50, and the soft signal doesn't really help in that particular scenario, with Aleem Dar raising his finger. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, England did deserve to win the game. You can't argue that they played bad cricket at all. I think they were really, really superb throughout both tests. And another key talking point, in fact, the biggest key talking point across both tests would have to be the pitch. Now, the Rawalpindi pitch was not up to par, and it has received a demerit point as well. And if it receives three more demerit points in, I believe, 4 more years, then Rawalpindi could be suspended from hosting any international cricket for 12 months consecutively, which is really, really bad. And the Pindi crowd really deserves better. But as far as the Multan pitch is concerned, Daniel, it was result oriented. We got a result in 4 days. But I just want to know, what do you make of the Multan pitch? And also, do you think that it favored Pakistan's strengths? Did it play to Pakistan's strengths at all, or did it not?
In hindsight, given the situation that Pakistan found themselves in, it probably did. Because how often do you find yourself in a situation where what you thought were your three premier fast bowlers, Shaheen before the series, then Haris, and then Naseem, all of them aren't playing. Without them, if you have them available, then you probably say Pakistan's base bowling obviously is stronger than England's on in terms of the current lineup. But now that Pakistan didn't have them available, they probably thought spin, especially the so-called mystery spin of Abrar, could be a factor that changed things up. Of course, you at that point then have to take into account that the spinner with the greatest pedigree this series is an English spinner. It's Jack Leach. He completed 100 wickets this Test match. He's someone who did well in the English summer as well. So if you prepare that sort of pitch, there's always going to be that sort of risk. And then at the same time, you have people like James Anderson who aren't hindered by any sorts of conditions, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
So he can produce certain match-winning balls and match-winning spells anywhere, whether it's the clouds of London or the sunlit uplands of Multan. So in that sense, I think Pakistan's bowling was in a situation where they backed themselves into a corner and spin was probably the only way they were trying to force a result. So
Mm-hmm.
I can see the thinking behind that, even if this isn't going to be a long-term strategy for them.
Right, and we saw from England in the second innings how the pace bowlers in both games really were the enforcers. Mark Wood produced a blistering spell in Multan, Ollie Robinson and Rawalpindi. Both Robinson and Jimmy Anderson were very, very good in Multan as well. Jimmy, of course, bowling that absolute Jaffa. No batter in, I think, contemporary cricket could probably have, played that delivery better than Mohammad Rizwan because it was just inch perfect and spectators' delight, really, even though we're Pakistan supporters, but I loved seeing that. Do you think that Pakistan lacked that enforcer as far as their bowling attack was concerned? Because they went in with one and a half pacer, right? You had Muhammad Ali and then you had Fahim Ashraf. So you didn't really have a lot of resources with respect to pace bowling. Do you think that was an error on Pakistan's part, or do you think they were just forced into that corner? Because we have all of those injuries with Shaheen, Naseem, and Haris sitting out. But then, Danyal, you also did have the option to bring in one of Hassan Ali or Abbas, who do have some test match experience. So, with respect to the pace bowling and bowling attack selection, what is your take?
I mean, I can see it both ways. I thought not bringing in Hassan or Abbas, at least into the squad, was a bit strange, especially because, as I understand it, Naseem, Pakistan were aware of Naseem's injury since well before the Multan test. They were aware of his injury in Pindi and how he was going to be a doubt. So I don't see how not having him as cover and giving themselves an extra option wouldn't have helped them. I thought that was a bit strange. Not once they didn't do that, it immediately became clear what sort of game plan they were going to adopt and what sort of pitch they were going to prepare. And that was going to be a pitch that, in their view, turned from day one, which it did in the end.
Mm-hmm.
But then you've spoken to Athers as well. I spoke to him during this test, and one of the things he said was, "This is not a pitch that's deteriorating. It might have
Mm-hmm.
been turning on day one. It's if anything, it's getting better." And so losing the toss and having to field first wasn't as big a disadvantage for Pakistan
Uh-huh.
as I feared it might be in on the morning when Babar called incorrectly and Pakistan were forced to field. They scored the highest innings total in the match was in the fourth innings. So in that sense, there's a real opportunity for Pakistan, especially because England seemed to think in the third innings on that third morning that the game was in the bag, and they batted with the sort of cavalier attitude that suggested that they didn't need any more runs, and
Mm-hmm.
so they thought they had enough, especially the way Pakistan had batted. But then obviously Pakistan taking it to the last day again, and once more losing their final 5 wickets the way they did. It was for 9 runs in Pindi, it was
Mm-hmm.
38 runs in Multan. I think the sense that there were missed opportunities, despite England probably being the better side across both
Mm-hmm.
tests, that is the thing that's going to hurt Babar and Pakistan.
All right. And Abrar Ahmed, of course, on Test match debut, he took 11 wickets and a 7 for in his very first innings. In the Qaid Azam Trophy, he had 43 wickets in 7 games this season. And it was quite a surprise when Abrar wasn't selected for Pindi. But in hindsight, given the Pindi surface, do you think it might have been a blessing in disguise for Abrar to be safe to the Multan test? Or do you think he could have made a difference in the Pindi test?
I mean, I did admire his honesty because he just told us. He said, "Yeah, it was." You remember in that first press conference on day one, he said, "Yeah, maybe it was good. I didn't play there." So in a way, there's refreshing honesty there. What I can't do is credit Pakistan with any sort of tactical nous for that because it
Mhm.
might have been good for Abrar at that point, but choosing a spinner that's performed palpably worse in your own domestic setup is an odd way of going about things. So
Mhm.
once again, Saklan Mushtaq was very upfront about this. He said it was experience with the team versus performance in the domestic
Mhm.
circuit, and the decision he made wasn't a popular one. It was I struggle to understand fully the reason behind that. But then sometimes it's funny the way things work out. I think in a way, Zahid probably has played 2 or 3 years later than would have been his best years as well. So I feel a bit
Mhm.
sorry for him, the situation he was thrust in. But from Pakistan's point of view, yeah, not having Abrar there was a bit odd. For Abrar, the confidence boost of just playing your first test, taking 11 wickets, probably stands him in better stead than figures of 4 for 117 Islamabad
Mhm.
probably would have done. And in that sense, if if Pakistan feel they've got a spinner because they have a real crisis in terms of
Mhm.
bringing through a spinner, especially a leg spinner now that Yasir seems to have faded. If Pakistan feel they have a spinner that can maybe shepherd them through the next 2 or 3 seasons in Abrar, then that is a real positive that they can take from the series, regardless of how ultimately the series pans out, because there's not many other positives to draw in terms of Pakistan's performances and results.
Yeah, that is very true. Pakistan has been in a bit of a crisis ever since the best of Yasir has evaded Pakistan, because they've tried a few guys in Sajid, Noman, and now Zahid Mahmood, but no one really has been able to fill those boots and, trouble the world with their spin. And just one last bit on selection, Danyal. Azhar Ali was dropped for this test match. Of course, the 96 test match veteran hasn't had the best of times ever since that bumper year he had, in which he scored a triple hundred and then also scored a double in Melbourne. His career has been on the wane, even though he's had that odd 100 here and there, but he hasn't been the same sort of consistent batter that he was for Pakistan back in the day, especially when Misbah ul Haq was captain. So what do you think about Azhar's future? Do you think that he could be drafted in for a test match or two later on? Do you think he'll get to 100 tests? Or do you think it's time Pakistan moves on to some young blood?
I mean, in a way, they're two different questions. So, whether I think he should play or not just depends on the depth that Pakistan have and the options that they have at their disposal. Whether he'll actually play is a different question. I suspect he probably will be brought back at some stage. I thought it was interesting in the press conference before the Multan test when Babar was asked a question about Azhar. He wasn't quite as effusive in backing him as I suspected he might have been. Maybe there should have been a clue there we should have picked up on. But with Azhar, he's done just about enough over the past 2 or 3 years to manage to retain his place in the side without quite pulling his weight in the way that he did in the earlier years. He's been one of Pakistan's best batters, really, best ever batters by a number of metrics. Mm-hmm. But the issue for Pakistan is when Misbah and Yunus retired, they thought Azhar and Asad were the princes of Pakistan's middle order batting. They were going to step up. And then Azhar and Asad's numbers actually dropped for a couple of years. Asad's never really recovered. Now Pakistan don't even have those so-called princes who they expect can take over. They have Salman Ali Agha and Saud Shakeel who they tried the series, but they don't nearly have the pedigree that Azhar and Asad had at the time Misbah and Yunus walked away. So there's this real hole in the middle order that Pakistan, I think, don't really know at the moment how to fix. Saud Shakeel's performance is, of course, encouraging, but this is someone who's played 2 test matches. Mm-hmm. I think at some point, if they don't play Azhar, they might consider Fawad Alam again, because that's a question that Pakistan never quite find an answer that satisfies everyone. But if you ask me for a prediction, I suspect Azhar will probably play again. Not in the 3rd test, but at some point, I think, given the way Pakistan's middle order batting is, I think they might be forced to turn to him at some point, even if it is for a short stint. I hope he gets to 100 tests. But even if he doesn't, I don't think that's going to take away anything from the legacy and the career that he has.
Yeah, definitely that would not define his career. He has been a very, very good servant for Pakistan cricket, and he's stuck it out in the tough times. And yeah, I kind of hope too that he gets to 100 tests. But coming to young talent now, Saud Shakeel, of course, only 2 test matches old. He hasn't really had a failure in test cricket thus far. 37 is his lowest score. He's got 350s in 4 outings, but then again, he couldn't quite convert any of those 50s to 100. I think that's only a matter of time, though, because he's a pedigreed first-class player. He averages north of 50 in first-class cricket. And in this year, the Quaid-e-Azam Trophy, in 12 innings, he got 400s, was averaging 68.5. Has been very, very impressive versus England in the series. He's looked compact, but then also he's opened his shoulders versus the spinners, has come down the track to Jack Leach a lot, and that back foot punch that he played against the spinners so regularly, I was really, really impressed. I think that was the hallmark of his batting in the series for me. So what do you make of Saud? Do you think he has a very fruitful future for Pakistan in years to come?
I know you're a fan of that back foot punch. I've seen you mention it more than once in the media room as well. With Shakeel, what I like about him is he's one of those players who always is himself. So he came into the side and he was a very different player to the kind of cricket that England were playing. So in that first test, on that first day, England score 500. And people think Pakistan will respond by scoring at a decent clip, which they do. Babar actually upped his game in terms of his strike rate as well. But Saud was perfectly comfortable playing his own way. I think got 35 of 90 on that in that first innings. He was all right with that. In 3 of the 4 innings that he's played, he's had a strike rate under 50. In the other innings, I think he's had a strike rate of 59. So he understands what his strengths are and also what his limitations are. He doesn't need to. I mean, we'll come on to Ramiz Raja's comments around T20 players, but Saud understands that that's not who he is. He understands what his strengths are, and he knows that's the best way to get the most out of his career and his batting. You mentioned his averages. One of the most striking things about his first-class career isn't just his average overall, but I think he averages close to 70 in the 4th innings in first-class cricket, and that's one of the things that generally tends to mark out the temperament of a player. He's not excessively young now. He's I think they're 27, 28.
Yes, 27.
Um, yeah, exactly. So he's someone who has a pedigree that a batter who's just coming in might not have. He's someone you can rely on in terms of patterns of play and the sort of cricketer he is in red ball cricket, especially in Pakistan. But then when it comes to the fourth innings, I thought we can talk about the dismissal, but I thought the way he led aside in terms of chasing what was it was a fairly high target in quite a bit of
Hmm.
pressure against a good bowling attack. I think that's the thing that showed real character. Yes, he got out. Yes, he shouldn't have played the shot that he did. But Saud Shakeel, in terms of Pakistan's batting, if he can carry on like that, then there are suggestions that this is one batter who is capable of the huge step up that exists between first class cricket and international cricket.
Yeah, and still early days for South, of course, and we wish him the best of luck. I am a big fan. I just love left-handers in general, and then he's just so compact, and like you said, he's an antithesis to the way England play their cricket. That belligerent, gung ho sort of berserk
But
approach,
also,
and then you have
sorry
South
to,
who takes his time.
yeah. So yes, the other thing that before this escapes me, the one thing I found interesting was so when he batted with Nawaz, they had that 80-run partnership. It wasn't just so people thought maybe Salman Ali Agha would come in instead of Nawaz as a right-left combination, but even
Mhm.
there's enough variance in the way Nawaz bats and Saud Shakeel bat to give England plenty to ponder. So, for example, I think I had the
Mhm.
numbers on this in a piece, and Saud Shakeel I think swept one ball in 43 in that
Mhm.
entire partnership, whereas Nawaz against spin and Nawaz was sweeping one ball in every five. So
Mhm.
he was playing more, as you say, more compact. He was playing within himself. He was playing with a straighter bat. Nawaz was doing completely different things. If you see Ben Duckett bat, you might think, okay, that's the way to play. You sweep everything. But once it just goes back to Saud Shakeel understanding perfectly what his game is and what allows him to thrive. And I think that's another thing that marks him out. He just doesn't try to be, at least from what I've seen in these two matches, doesn't try to be someone he's not. Doesn't try to adapt his game where he to the extent that he strays into territory where he isn't as strong as he has been. He tries what works for him, and for now, what works for him in first class cricket also works for him in international cricket.
Yep, some brilliant nuggets of information over there from Danyal. And if you viewers want to know more, he has written a piece on Saud Shakeel, so go check that out on Cricinfo. And just to go further on the same conversation to carry it forward, we've spoken about this, Danyal, even in the media box, that how England's approach in Test cricket, what everyone is coining as BazBall, is also largely because England have those resources at their doorstep. They have all of those sort of players who can come in attack in Test cricket, and you've seen that with Will Jacks, Liam Livingston, all of these guys that they've brought in. And everyone wants Pakistan to play a similar brand of cricket and go with a similar approach, but then Pakistan might not have those resources. Ramiz Raja, like you said, was also mentioning to young kids that we need to start playing test matches like T20 cricket. So what do you make of all of this discourse and conversation? Do you think Pakistan really need to go and completely shift the way they play their test cricket, much like England, or they have to utilize their own resources optimally? And if you're looking for these sort of mindset changes, they can only happen over like generations. This is not an overnight fix.
So I think I'd slightly disagree with the point that everyone wants Pakistan to play that same way because even in the setup, I don't think a lot of people want Pakistan to play the same way. I
Mhm.
think there's no suggestion that Babar is progressive enough in terms of his views on cricket to want Pakistan to play that way. I don't think Saklan Mushtaq necessarily wants Pakistan to play that way. And before these 2 weeks, there'd been no signs that even the PCB chairman wanted Pakistan to play this
Mhm.
way. So I think there might be a bit of reactionary thinking just by being blown away by the shock and awe tactics that England have employed, because no one
Mhm.
really thought England would be as successful with them in Pakistan as they were at home. And I think that sort of reactionary stuff will go away once England go away because the New
Mhm.
Zealand series will be a very different series. Um, Even if, like you said, even if these factors didn't exist, if Pakistan also had a coach that had everyone buying into the same idea, if Pakistan also had a coach who told Pakistan, look, you're going to play this aggressive, progressive way, there are going to be no consequences if you get out playing a stupid shot. There are going to be no consequences if you lose a match that you where you were in a winning position, and the media and the fans aren't going to absolutely slaughter you, then perhaps Pakistan might play that way. But you know, and I know, and everyone knows that Pakistan, in terms of all these factors converging, Pakistan are a long, long way away from all these things
Mhm.
happening. Um, Pakistan might not get the. I mean, BazBall. was successful initially because England had a few good results. I thought if England had lost the first 2 or 3 test matches, the media and the fans might have turned earlier there as well. With Pakistan, there's no evidence that there's going to be that sort of patience. And all of this doesn't take into account the fact that, as you said, Pakistan don't have the players or maybe
Mhm.
even the appetite to go that way. Pakistan don't have a project that suggests that they want to go that way either. Pakistan don't really even have the surfaces to suggest that. So yeah, I don't think Pakistan should play that way, partially because Pakistan can't play that way. And if someone raises that now and weren't talking about it 3 months ago, then I think you could wonder if they're perhaps being just a bit reactionary. I'd like to see the same sort of appetite for BazBall in 3 months as there is now in Pakistan cricket, when the England series has sort of been allowed to fade in the memory slightly and people are allowed to get a bit more perspective on it. England can do it in a way that Pakistan and a lot of other countries just can't right now, in my view.
And in Pakistani coaching setups, you have this notion that you have to put a prize on your wicket. You don't have to play a lot of aerial strokes, and you have to get in there, get well set, and then go on and take your innings forward. So just to shift from that, even if you hypothetically want to do that, will take a generation or two, and I don't think it's just possible overnight. But also, I think you make a very good point where you say that this is not everyone's wish. It's just like the fan base really wants Pakistan to go gung ho. But then again, I pointed this out as well, Danyal, to you, and we were speaking about it, is that Pakistan were not going at 3.5, 4 runs per over in Test cricket prior to this series. So do you think that that is a positive that they have gained in this Test series, that at least they're not going under 3 runs and over?
I think partially, but you also have to take into account the opposition you're playing. So, one of the reasons that Pakistan might be going at a higher rate is being in the press box, one of the things you get to pick up on is the sort of fielding changes that
Mhm.
both sides use. So, what England do a lot of the time is they bring the field up and they don't care if a ball goes for four. They don't care if they're conceding runs as long as they think they're still attacking in
Mhm.
for wickets. Australia, when the Australians were over here in Pakistan, they didn't necessarily set those same fields. So part of the reason that Pakistan go at a higher rate might just be because England have attacking fields where they don't
Yeah.
mind conceding runs in pursuit of wickets. Of course, part of it is also the pitches. So the Pindi pitch was so harmless, it perhaps made sense to go harder because it was easier too. And part of it is just that when one side takes to the attack and plays a certain way, it can be infectious. But I think
Mhm.
none of those things indicate a longer shift in Pakistan's strategy.
Mhm.
In fact, I think when New Zealand are here, I expect Pakistan's scoring rate to drop once again and drop pretty much to the same rate that it did before. I'm happy to be proved wrong about this, but I don't think I will be. So I think it's a lot of factors converging, and to suggest that Pakistan have changed philosophy even slightly on the back of 2 test matches against England, I think it's jumping the gun a little bit.
All right, let's move on to captaincy then. Of course, Ben Stokes' captaincy is making the headlines world over, not just with his consistently attacking fields. Of course, the fielders are always in. We've seen like the offside pack with short cover and, silly mid on, silly mid off, all of those guys really crowding the batters. And he's been quite ruthless with respect to those fields as well. Whereas you see Babar Azam and, you have two close in fielders most of the times, and sometimes not even that. So, how do you compare both captains? And of course, Ben Stokes kind of changed Test cricket really when he made that brave declaration in the first Test, handing Pakistan an opportunity to win the game, chasing 343 runs. Of course, he, in his own words, dangled the carrot to Pakistan, and that worked in England's favor. And England went on to record one of their most historic wins overseas ever. And James Anderson even said that in his 176 or 77 Test career, that win was really, really special. So, from an outsider's perspective, Ben Stokes looks like this big, courageous lion who is really not afraid of anything. Whereas Pakistan's captaincy and leadership, and Babar Azam, of course, they come across as a bit timid. So, how would you compare both captaincy styles? And also, do you think that Babar needs to change his ways in order to be successful in Test cricket in the future?
Yes. So I'll answer the first question first. I think Ben Stokes, the way he's captaining, is just a product of the project that England have instituted almost institutionally across English Test cricket.
Mhm.
So he was made captain. Brendan McCullum came in as coach, and they had a particular remit around the way they wanted to play Test cricket. Babar Azam was appointed captain in circumstances that were quite different because I think he was appointed captain of the Test side a little earlier than Pakistan would have wanted. Azhar Ali wasn't in form, and at that time it perhaps made sense to have the guy who's your best batter and the guy who's captaining your white ball sides and a guy who's going to be a fixture across all three formats to just be handed the captaincy. And then there's been no pressure on Babar to evolve or perhaps change what his natural instincts are. So I think it's perhaps to be expected that he'd continue to captain and perform the way that he thinks best. And what he thinks best is perhaps a little regressive, not quite in sync with the modern game. But then at the same time, when you're against England, who take the attack to the opposition anyway, sometimes the reflexes to just shrink back. And Pakistan, I remember the first 2 or 3 days of the Windy Test were just talking about getting into a position where they couldn't lose the game, talking about a draw. So that's what an opposition like England or an especially attacking opposition can do. They can push you even further into whatever your base protective instincts are. And Babar and Pakistan's first instincts can sometimes tend to be preservation. You add on top of that a side that is one in transition and too low on confidence. Then yeah, of course, you're going to have an outcome where one side just looks a lot better than the other, and then anything that they do looks like it's the right thing to do, whereas anything Pakistan do look like it's on the way out, it's regressive, it's not going to work. And that's to England's credit, really.
Yeah, and you also alluded to the coaching setup early on, and a lot of people say that okay, Babar the captain, you can criticize him all you want, but the coaching setup behind him, the management, there seems to be a lack of that tactical nous. And we also mentioned earlier how Glenn Mushtaq was very open about the fact that the why they preferred Zahid Mahmood over Abrar Ahmed in the first test is because he had spent more time with the squad, whereas Abrar's performances, which were off the charts, they were overlooked because of Zahid's time with the team. And there are other examples of the coaching lack of coaching tactical nous. You've got the whole Kudrat Ka Nizam saga, and I could go on and on about this. So, what do you think should be the way forward? Is it time that Pakistan moves on from Saklan Mushtaq? What sort of positives does he bring? We've heard that he's a really good man manager. Is that perhaps a positive? Or are Pakistan really in regressive mode with respect to their strategies and everything? Because it doesn't seem like they're going towards, a point in Test cricket where they're looking to really win games and grab them by the scruff of the neck.
I think when it comes, it's an interesting one because I'm always wary of actually just calling for coaching changes. I think that sometimes because you and I and no one in the media will all ever be actually properly privy to dressing room conversations and the relationships between players and coaches. So it's possible, for example, when he preferred Zahid, when Saklan said, I prefer Zahid Mahmood to Abrar, and he was possibly just trying to keep the dressing room happy. And we know from the history of Pakistan's dressing rooms and the team dynamics that is actually quite an important thing to aspire to. An unhappy or an unsettled, a restive Pakistan dressing room is never going to produce good cricket anyway. So I think in some ways he understands that. And he has certain relationships with, for example, if you've appointed Babar captain and Babar's comfortable with Saklan, then in a way you can say, okay, maybe we aren't doing anything wrong because Pakistan have a coach and a manager who at least see eye to eye. At the same time, as I understand it, the bowlers seem to be quite happy with Sean Tate as the bowling coach. Mohammad Yusuf's coaching experience is interesting, but again, in terms of some of the tactical adjustments, this I think is where he probably earns his corn in a way because now Pakistan's batters are in a bit of a transitional phase, and this is where Yusuf is tasked with perhaps shepherding these players through the first class system into international cricket. And that's where you maybe they see something that we from the outside don't. In terms of the press conferences and the public appearances, yes, at times it looks like tactical nous is in short supply. And when you hear what Pakistan have to say versus a lot of the time what the opposition has to say, you feel like some of the modern analytics that have come into the game seem to have passed Pakistan by completely, especially when you have the same person in Saklan coaching the T20 side, the ODI side, the Test side. You sometimes wonder how sustainable that is. I think at some point it is going to come to a head. Saklan might decide he doesn't want to do the job in terms of all three formats either. But it's a results-based business. If you're not achieving results, then it almost doesn't matter what philosophy you have, you're going to come under pressure. And so if Saklan or Mohammad Yusuf or even Sean Tate are under pressure right now, I think that's only fair. Pakistan have lost 3 test matches in a row. And the fact that this has happened for the first time in 63 years is something that should raise questions.
Yep. If viewers you don't know, then the last time that Pakistan lost three successive Test matches at home was in 1959, and this is only the second time in their history that that has happened. They've never ever lost four successive Test matches at home. So let's hope that that does not happen. But I think I agree with Daniel over there that if the coaches are coming under fire, then rightly so, because it is a results-oriented game, and then there have been some issues that the public has had with respect to Saklen's coaching style. I do think that he does bring in value. The way the team is united and gelled. I think that for a Pakistani team to, accomplish that, it's a big deal. So I think that there are some positives, but really, if there aren't any good results in the near future, then I think it's going to be quite difficult for this coaching staff, especially Saklen Mushtaq, to continue. But I want to, divert the conversation somewhere else, Daniel. Now, we saw that there were four Test match debutants in Rawalpindi. So Pakistan's Test team is also a work in progress right now. It's going through a bit of a transitional period. And we know that a lot of these top nations in world cricket have a lot of A tours. And that's how they nurture their talent for the future. And Pakistan have wonderful talent coming in the Qaid-e-Azam Trophy. You've got Mohammad Herrera, you've got Saim Ayub, and Mohammad Umar looked really impressive for Sindh. Of course, Abrar was there till not too long ago. And a bunch of other guys I'm probably forgetting right now. I think even what's his name? Heather Ali has an average north of 50 in Test first class cricket. So there's that as well. And Pakistan doesn't really play a lot of A tours anymore. So how do you think that this talent can be nurtured and be primed for red ball cricket in the future? Do they need to bring in more A tours? Do they need to switch something up in the Qaid-e-Azam Trophy? What do you think is the way forward?
I mean, the first thing is obviously players do benefit. Sorry, players do benefit from A tours, but at the same time, it also probably would help if there wasn't such a huge disparity between the conditions in which the Qaid-e-Azam Trophy is played and the conditions in which Test cricket is played. And
Mm-hmm.
perhaps that does hark back to the pitches and the way they're prepared. We've talked about the Pindi surface and how its Qaid-e-Azam average first class
Mm-hmm.
first inning score is 210, 211, and then they play Test matches there and they produce these absolute roars. So, and then of course also it ties in with the Saklan Mushtaq preferring Zahid to Abrar, even though Abrar has a
Mm-hmm.
better Qaid-e-Azam record. So I think it probably comes back to some extent valuing the Qaid-e-Azam Trophy more than Pakistan sometimes seem to. A consistency of conditions across both the tournament and the way first-class cricket and international cricket is played in Pakistan,
Mm-hmm.
and yes, more exposure for the top performing guys. For example, Mohammad Herrera, he's only 20. He's
Mm-hmm.
now the leading run scorer in two successive Qaid-e-Azam Trophy editions, if
Yep.
I'm not wrong. If he makes the step up to Pakistan cricket, I can easily see a situation where perhaps he struggles for the first three or four tests and suddenly
Mm-hmm.
find himself under pressure, people beginning to question if he's good enough. So I think to smooth the journey there, the fact that Pakistan don't have international exposure in terms of A tours outside of
Mm-hmm.
the Qaid-e-Azam Trophy, yes, of course that becomes a problem. But I think it's a convergence of a lot of factors. I still sometimes feel as if having coaches that understand that the first class system and international cricket are just huge step ups. That
Mm-hmm.
is the most basic thing. But I don't have the numbers in hand. I was reading this piece that talked about how A tours had starkly dropped off, and I'd like to see the first few matches of batters and bowlers in an
Mm-hmm.
era where Pakistan played more A tours than now. I'm sure that would also carry
Yeah.
weight, but it's probably a convergence of factors that needs to be better researched.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And Daniel, of course, highlights the gulf between first class cricket and test cricket. And we've seen a lot of players in the past also mention this. Babar Azam took his good time to find his feet in test cricket. Shan Masood has said time and again that you need a consistent run of games in test cricket to, become good at the format. And that's why it's test cricket, right? It's really, really hard to succeed in that arena. And Daniel, if we look at this World Test Championship cycle as a whole, when it was about to start, you looked at Pakistan's series, a lot of top teams at home, and then you had Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and the West Indies away. Now they lost a test each in Sri Lanka and West Indies, and you lost your home series versus Australia and England, with New Zealand yet to come. But overall, as a whole, where do you think it really all went wrong? If you had to pinpoint like a few factors.
Um, well, I mean, every the thing is when just two teams qualify for the final, then every dropped point hurts.
Mhm.
But what Pakistan probably thought at the time was the reason this is such a good opportunity, of course, is that the so-called harder teams, bigger teams that Pakistan had to play the cycle, they had to play at home. So they had a lot more control over the conditions in
Mhm.
which those series would be played. The so-called weaker, relatively speaking, teams that Pakistan had to play, they had to play away. So they had a good opportunity to be able to just win by dint of being better cricket teams. The fact that they dropped points against the West Indies straight away in that first series didn't help, obviously.
Mhm.
But then I think ultimately when this cycle ends, we'll just end up looking back at that Australia series and
Mhm.
how in that first test Pakistan neutralized the surface and just shirked away from potentially giving it a real go. Because the whole point of the World Test Championship was that you value a test and a series beyond just the fact that you might win or lose a series. And I think in
Mhm.
hindsight, if you find yourself in a position where you can qualify for the World Test Championship, perhaps it's worth risking a 2-0 or a 2-1 series defeat while actually going for it. You're not going to
Right.
qualify for any World Test Championship by drawing games. And so taking that first test out of the equation really set a template that Pakistan were in sort of self-preservation and series preservation mode and not really looking at the bigger WTC picture. From what I've heard, there wasn't much there wasn't much interest in qualifying for the World Test Championship in terms of that being looked at as a
Mhm.
holistic, overarching aim. Which I think is a bit of a shame because Pakistan are not one of the best two top sides in the world, so they're not
Mhm.
going to get an opportunity like this probably in the next 3 or 4 cycles. So I think that's the real
Right.
pity, the fact that they're now effectively out of this cycle, because this is an opportunity that perhaps should have been taken more seriously than it was at board level and at cricketing level.
Yep, agreed. And it is an opportunity that us supporters will also rue because, at the start of the cycle, we were really, really optimistic with Pakistan's chances, at least to give it a proper fight. But over here, they're down and out, and we still have three more test matches to go. So, quickly, Daniel, on a closing note, Pakistan versus England in Karachi for the final test of the series. And Naseem Shah still has a shoulder niggle. And neither of Hassan Ali or Abbas yet have been drafted into the team. What sort of changes do you expect from Pakistan? Do you still think Babar Azam will play at number three? That's something that he mentioned in the presses, that he wanted to step up and perform in terms of that role for the team, because he didn't want to chuck a youngster in over there with that sort of responsibility. He wanted to take that responsibility as a senior player. But then also, the lack of pace bowlers in the squad. You went in with Fahim, who's an all rounder, and just one frontline pacer in Muhammad Ali. So, what sort of changes do you want to see, or do you expect to see at the same time? Because what we often want to see in Pakistan's 11 is not what we get.
It's also partially, I think we have to remember. So, for example, the One Day Cup is taking place in Karachi right now. So, technically, if they wanted someone at short notice, they could get someone from there in a way that they couldn't in Multan. So, I think that's
Mhm.
probably a factor. So, the fact that there'll be a lot more players playing actively in Karachi that they can monitor and call upon. But all the evidence again suggests that they're not going to be a huge number of changes. I think the big one that everyone's talking about potentially is Shan Masood as a bit
Mhm.
more top to get a bit more top order stability. Obviously, that probably threatens Salman Ali Agha's place, which would
Mhm.
be unfortunate for him, given that it's not as if he's done something wrong in these two tests here and then two in Sri Lanka. But yeah, it's just that Pakistan's batting is in such a transitional phase, and the fact that their bowling is so inexperienced that Pakistan might just value the experience of Shan Masood here.
Mhm.
So whether they turn to another fast bowler, change their combination, probably depends on the kind of surface they're going to prepare in Karachi. And I've just stopped making predictions about the kind of surfaces you'll see
Mhm.
now. It's just you just get a different surface every time. But yeah, I think with the batting, it's just probably expect Shan Masood to come in, and that I don't think they're going to go big in terms of wholesale changes. And perhaps they shouldn't either, because I couldn't tell you 3 or 4 changes that suddenly make turns this side from an
Mhm.
average side into a side that can beat England. So yeah, might as well just stick with it and just churn out a better performance, because they weren't that far away in
Mhm.
Multan, and yeah, potentially just the non-bounce of a ball away and a soft signal away. Who knows? And
Yeah.
that's the sort of spirit they probably have to take there, even if they go into what is a dead rubber and a dropped chance at a World Test Championship shot. Yeah.
Yeah, and every test match does matter in the World Test Championship cycle. And sure, Pakistan might not have a chance to make it to the final, but at least they could finish the cycle strong. Something they did last cycle as well versus South Africa. I personally would definitely have one of Abbas or Hassan Ali in there, just for the experience. But I think the Shan Masood point is very, very valid. Of course, given how successful he has been for Derbyshire in the county circuit, that definitely, favors him. and aids him as well in terms of selection. And I personally would like to see Babar Azam at number 4. I know I asked you this question and you did not make much of it, but I do think, and I am of the school of thought, that your best batter should be at number 4 in Test cricket. We've seen Joe Root tried at number 3 consistently, and he couldn't quite replicate the same sort of numbers that he does at number 4. But I mean, this is just a subjective thing. And you viewers, let us know what changes you would make to Pakistan's squad for the third Test match in Karachi in the comment section below. That's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much, Danyal, for taking out the time and talking cricket with me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Beram.
Yep, and I'll be seeing you soon, of course, in Karachi in the media box. And viewers, if you liked this episode, like it, share it, subscribe to our channel, follow us across social media platforms. We at Grassroots Cricket, we're trying to change the landscape of cricket coverage in Pakistan. So support us, follow our work, and yeah, we love to bring new content to you, and I'll try to keep doing that as I'm headed to Karachi day after tomorrow. So expect more fan cams, expect more match reports, and yeah, I'll try to even get the Barmy Army for a few interviews. I have that in mind. But thank you so much once again, Danyal and viewers, and we'll catch you soon enough. That's all for now. Goodbye.